Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit.
Welcome to Magister Dixit, a podcast that invites you on a journey into realms of expertise, imagination, and occultism. Delve deep into the minds of those that have dedicated their lives to mastering their crafts, and how having an esoteric or supernatural influence has shaped that path. In each episode, we will engage with magisters, true masters of their respected fields, as they share their unparalleled insights, unconventional knowledge, and their unique perspectives. Venture into the mystical as we converse with filmmakers, musicians, and renowned authors. Listen to their perspectives on their respected disciplines and how being a practitioner of occultism has influenced their craft. Remember, in the realm of knowledge, Magister Dixit, the master has spoken. Today we have the honor of hosting an individual whose journey weaves through the ethereal realms of music and the profound mysteries of the left-hand path. Shea Bilé's work delves into the esoteric, exploring the intersection of Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy with the contemporary expressions of the left-hand path. His book, Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left-Hand Path, stands as a pioneering exploration of philosophical foundations that underpin esoteric ideologies. Shea brings a depth of intellectual inquiry to their esoteric pursuits. Their academic journey provides a solid foundation for dissecting the intricate layers of Nietzschean philosophy and its impact on contemporary left-hand path ideology. Let's welcome Shea to the show. All right, so I'd like to welcome you to Magister Dixit. Excited to have you on the show and get started with everything. I'd like for you to give me just a little bit of your personal journey and how you became interested in philosophy and eventually the left-hand path.
It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to have this discourse with you, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
For the last 25 years, I have been both a student of and a devotee of heterodoxy, primarily left-hand path Satanism. And in the last 10 years, it's engaged more in serious scholarship. To kind of make it more or less succinct, I would say that it started with me kind of growing up in one of the rougher parts of Los Angeles and being a child of the 90s, seeing what you see, especially in the early 90s in Los Angeles. It was mayhem.
Riots.
And growing up right, all the time. And just it was palpable, the violent stigma.
I think people forget all too quickly, maybe, how really tense those times were on the West Coast. Absolutely.
And my family, we were in the heart of it. My father, Vietnam vet, and he worked in manufacturing, just blue collar. And we lived in that part of LA all that time and didn't really move out of it until I was already into my adolescence. But I had that opportunity to kind of be around gangs, and I was on the receiving end of a lot of bullying, and I had to learn quickly how to not fold into the pressure, and fold into kind of what I was going through, be a victim. And I didn't feel any reprieve in Christianity. I didn't feel any kind of support there. It didn't make sense to me, this idea that things will turn out okay.
Was your family religious?
I call them part-time Catholic.
Yeah.
And when I first got into the idea of magic, because gave me the sense that I might be able to get a hand in this situation. I might be able to get out of my environment. I might be able to affect it in some way. I might be able to have power here, where I felt like I didn't have any, and both at home and both out of home. And that turned into a deep interest in the occult, and I kind of more or less immersed myself in it. And once I became aware of Satanism, which at the time there was not much available. I didn't own a computer until I was an adult, so I didn't have the internet or anything. And the internet was in its it was in its early stages as far as having broad, it had only been in homes for a few years. And so my exposure to Satanism was through the Satanic Bible and the books by Anton LaVey.
Which those books can at least be begotten at a local bookstore, sometimes even in like your bigger malls and stuff. You could actually find those books in the early 90s there. It's provided you didn't have some Christian group coming in and ripping the covers off. I know I grew up in New York, and that seemed to be the problematic thing at the local B. Dalton, is that they would have some of the religious zealots come in and rip the covers and stuff, and then they would have to send them back, and things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. One of the earliest books of magic I got in the mall, and it was at B. Dalton, and it was Magic and Witchcraft by Catherine Poulsen. That's actually a good book. 25 years later, I still think it's an awesome book. And what it really did is it just took all the old Grimoire material and kind of threw it into one place. But yeah, when I read the Satanic Bible, it had a profound effect on me. I mean, it was the first time I felt a sense of self-valuation. So this idea that one's own birthday is the highest holiday, even in a world where there isn't love coming from anywhere else, what's important is the value you place on yourself. And it empowered one to stand against his enemies and to fight back and to not let others define you or dictate your value. And I needed to hear that at that age. I needed to hear it from someone.
I think we all did. And those are when I remember very much. I'm a little older than you, but when I read the Satanic Bible, same thing. I'm like, these are easy tenets. I could do this, like be good to myself and fuck everybody else. And if somebody messes with you, don't turn the other cheek, turn around and smash their face in and stuff. As a young, hormone raging individual growing up and stuff, those were definitely virtues that spoke to me. Absolutely. Like I could roll with this,
Yeah, 100%. I think, in that place, God was not something that was reaching out to me. God wasn't there to offer any kind of hand, and it was both conceptually and I think in a spiritual sense, it was the satanic religion that uplifted me and allowed me and fortified me and really helped me survive. And it helped me survive the hardest years of my life when I was most powerless. And it gave me the thread that pulled me into adulthood. And from there, once I had a direct hand in my fortune, once I had a direct hand in my fate and I could start making my own decisions, I've dedicated my life to it, both artistically, musically, through authorship, through lecturing, through speaking, and not just Satanism, but heterodoxy in general. The idea of the subversive, of the antinomian, the idea of the fringe. I've followed that thread to this very day, and so I've devoted my life to teaching and preaching the history and legacy of this religion, of the left-hand path, and everything in between. So that's what brings me here now.
Interesting. And how did it unfold for you after reading, Dr. LaVey's books? What was the next level for you? How did you take what was the next step in the process for you? Did you try to become part of an organized group of Satanists? Did you reach out to Dr. LaVey, or did you try to join the Church of Satan? What was the course of action for a young Shea in Los Angeles in mid-1990s?
Sure. I missed him by a few years. I missed him by about a year. He had already passed. But, I was already a pretty spiritual, it was unrefined spirituality, but I was a very metaphysical person. And that is, my mother was very spiritual, and some would say superstitious, but it was part of her practice. And
well, I read is she a medium that I read? I think I saw something with you.
Yeah. Sure. She is, even though she was more or less a dedicated Christian or Catholic, she was always kind of non-denominational, even though she, most of her life she was Catholic. But she would talk about past lives, and she would tell me about who I was in previous lives and people in my family. And she would walk into rooms and tell me the history or people who had lived there before, and hauntings, and a lot of things would happen when my mother would talk about these things. And it at a very early age, it was very compelling. And that was beyond the personal experiences that I had as a child and being in what was understood to be a haunted house, and the interactions with spirits and in dreams and just paranormal
your mother made
activity.
You very comfortable with all of these ideas, or like you just kind of grew up with that to a degree?
Made me comfortable with the ideas. From the very beginning, I wasn't drawn into the supernatural because it was a lot of the things that causes, I would say, some Christians or some other religionists to run from it are the very same thing as I experienced it. I just became curious and interested, and I developed a palate for some of the darker aspects of the occult and supernaturalism. But I encountered all of the horrible things that some people talk about and warn in those Christian books from the Satanic Panic, that these demons and these spirits, these horrible, these horrible experiences. I started off seeing my earliest encounter with the supernatural was what they would call a hag attack, or what they now call sleep paralysis demons.
Yeah, sleep paralysis, yes.
So of a spirit crushing me and waking up, and a black sphere hanging above the door with faces coming in and out of this sphere. And I passed out. I woke up suffocating and saw that. And that was my very first encounter. I was maybe 3 or 4. It was my first encounter with the supernatural. So I came to respect and be fascinated with some of the more less palatable aspects of the occult. But my mother, I guess, opened me up to those things. I suppose I developed a interest and a devotion to aspects of it she wouldn't necessarily care for. Right.
Understood. and not only that, but I think, like, when you talk about the Catholics, and my family is Catholic as well, there's a lot of esotericism and a lot of Christian magic involved in some of that too, and when you say that your mom was a medium, I know that, in the Italian neighborhood, growing up, there was always those women that, they had the right sight or whatever, or they thought somebody's putting a maloik on you, you could go to them,
Sure.
and they had their processes or rituals, and to make you feel better about, that the, maybe to strip that, what's going on with you with the evil eye.
Yeah, I think that's a tradition that goes back a long way. I think my mother, so much as 500, 600, 700 years ago, would not have been as fortunate talking about those things. And yeah, it was fascinating. I think what it allowed me to do is see that there is a lot more mystery to life, that life can be strange. And my mother started me off at a young age, kind of being open to the possibilities that we live in a strange world. And there's more going on than an immediate glance, right? And I think that's actually important because that developed into a general interest in the world and a open-mindedness that has allowed me to, over the years, interact with, befriend, collaborate with, and witness very interesting, strange, eccentric, and odd people in art. And I'm very fortunate for that. I feel blessed by that. And I feel like that was a part of my salvation.
Awesome. And growing up in LA, I mean, you're right there in the heart of Magic Land, Hollywood.
Sure.
You know, so for, millions of people, that has always been a huge draw, to bring people to Hollywood, and the magic within all of that. And, for me, that starts to just fall right into Kenneth Anger, Hollywood, Babylon type of stuff. And, knowing all the histories, the dark pasts of the people from Hollywood and stuff, I don't know if you've ever read Hollywood Babylon, but for me, it was,
Sure.
Hearing the stories of, like Fatty Arbuckle and them, and, just how the careers were made in a moment and lost in a moment, and it was just like, you could be fresh face out from wherever, in the country. And if you made a couple of the wrong moves, you were right back into the wasteland again,
Yeah, I think Los Angeles has a spirit to it. And I think a lot of cities have their own character, have their own spirit, both in a secular sense, but also possibly something a little more. I think I had a friend from years ago described LA, I think, in a very pointed and accurate way, and it's the city that wants to kill you. And just the level of kind of this very strong, potent energy in Los Angeles that in a positive way leads to innovation, artistic vision, and creativity. And in another part of it leads into random acts of violence and a lot of movements have come up out of Los Angeles, and that energy can take form in different ways. And I think that's kind of the current of nature itself, that once it's filtered through a human, it could then manifest itself in different ways. Some we would call constructive or destructive. But yeah, growing up in LA, it formed my image of the unknown. I remember being 13 or 14. I went to Panpipe's Magical Marketplace there in Hollywood. I think it's still there. And right off Hollywood Boulevard, because my dad liked to go to the Strip. He liked going there. Even being a resident of LA, he liked to go to the tourist areas of Hollywood. And the Panpipes is right there. And I went there to get my first ritual dagger. And there was one time the shop was about to close, and this interesting character walks in, kind of gothic looking guy. And this is interesting. I don't know if he'll hear this, but it's Salvatore Santoro. He runs the Crooked Path. He's kind of becoming an increasing figure within the community in this newer age of occultism in Los Angeles. And I was just there. I was at a conference there. He held a conference there. I was speaking there, and he walks in, and he hands this card to me. That's the Sator Square, Sator, the Sator Magical Square. And he hands me the card, and he says, "This is my satanic nightclub event. Bring your fake ID." And I ran into him like 20 years later, and I said, "Did you used to run this?" And I was able to corroborate it. But what this did at 13, 14 is it allowed me to see this magical idea of what I think Satanists might be. Because again, This is before the internet and YouTube, really. And so I had this idea of these really cool and kind of slick and interesting and occultic and dark characters within the satanic underground. And it was this very important fantasy. And I think that guided me. And as I got older, I realized that my fantasy didn't actually exist, but there was the urban legends right there in LA. There's Turnbull Canyon. And I grew up with people saying, oh, there's devil worshippers up there in the mountains. My friend, his dad, does rituals there with his other devil worshiping friends. And so I grew up with these urban myths about various groups of devil worshippers, and it's during the age of the Satanic Panic. And I thought, those guys sound fucking cool. And I thought, I want to do that when I get older. And what I found over time is I became that devil worshiper. What's guided some of my religious expression, some of the rituals I do, going out into the wilderness in different places around this country and in Europe, and doing these really transgressive, really antinomian, really large-scale ritual operations that are guided around a traditional interpretation of Satanism, a mythical interpretation of Satanism. I've become the weird devil worshiper that does the rituals in the mountains. And because I noticed as I got older, those really didn't exist. Now, there's some interesting people, and there are some examples here and there, but it wasn't that fantasy I'd built for myself. So I realized I had to become it.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. Understandable. It's like, you hear all these tales, I'm not from the West Coast, but obviously, you have the workings of Jack Parson out there with L. Ron Hubbard. Sure. And you also have crime
Devil's
element.
Gate.
Yeah, there it is, Devil's Gate. And you also have crime elements going on in the 90s too, like the Night Stalker and,
that's right.
And
Sure.
Swear your life to Satan before he kills you and stuff.
Wow, and, that's right.
So all those, a lot of that vivid imagery jumps out at me, like when we start talking about this stuff and saying like, yeah, there wasn't maybe like, an actual coven that you knew about running around and doing this stuff, but there was all sorts that area has been a magnet for that type of thinking, I think, for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's the spirit of transgression. And I think that,
like, isn't it talking to Shasta Mountains too, that there was all sorts of like kind of rituals going on at Mount Shasta?
I heard about some of that, but I didn't get it in detail. So you were mentioning, you were kind of asking, I suppose, a bit ago, a progression from the Satanic Bible. What's interesting about that is, people think of the Satanic Bible, they think of kind of the atheistic, philosophical meanings, and that has power on its own. And I feel like there's a powerful legacy there. And LaVey's work had a massive, has a bigger influence on the occult than people either know or that they're willing to accept. And he's received a lot more heat than I think is necessary. In some ways, the Christian Inquisition of the 80s and 90s has won, in the sense that it's sullied LaVey's legacy, when in fact, he's had such a dramatic and profound impact on occult literature and the occult community that, that's why often, and in my book, in Friedrich Nietzsche and Left Hand Path, part of that is a rehabilitation of his legacy and philosophy and the kind of power behind that. But I have always been spiritual, to the point that all the kind of the atheistic things in the Satanic Bible didn't fully apply to my own belief. Like I said early on, I had a kind of a more spiritual, more religious identity, and that's been my relationship to Satanism. And that's
so just a humanism kind of approach, or whatever. You saw Satan as something more theistic.
Yeah, the theistic argument that you see dominating contemporary Satanism is, I think any in-depth study into theology and kind of philosophical history, the idea of there being a God or no God, there is an infinite spectrum in between on what this could mean. I think atheism operates from the idea of a monarchical enthroned God, the Christian paradigm as it is understood, but it doesn't consider ideas of pantheism, ideas of deism, ideas of panentheism, or the idea of God in parts, or the idea of God being more than the sum of its parts. The idea of emanations that you see in Vedic religion or Hinduism. There's all kinds of ways one can have a relationship to this concept of the divine, of God. So that's one way I do not care for the atheist versus theist.
I could agree with you on that to a degree too. And a couple observations in what you had just said there. I think that LaVey was very good at making himself and his works available to, like, so many people fit in the same kind of descriptors as yourself or me, how they came into contact with Dr. LaVey's works, and being able to get that stuff at a B. Dalton or a bookstore and stuff like that. I don't think any other occultist previous to Dr. LaVey had nearly the success that he had in getting the youth of the 80s and 90s out there, and for the first book to read about esotericism was, the Satanic Bible. Now, granted, it was wrapped in a lot of atheistic principles and not so much like a theistic being or whatever, but nonetheless, Dr. LaVey did do all that work previously, and I think just presented a very refined form of what he thought would be appealing to people at that time.
Sure. It kind of, an analogy in the world of modern art would be Picasso, and that is that he was classically trained, and so he could do he could do a lot of the works that were considered conventionally beautiful or conventional fine art, but it's his kind of cubist approach that comes later, that people saw a simplification, but it was because of an unwillingness to look deeper into what was going on. And I feel that's similar
Absolutely.
with LaVey's works. As LaVey, as you said, in a sense, was classically trained, quote unquote. He was familiar with Crowley's works. He was familiar with the Solomonic tradition. He had been a ceremonial tradition, or he had dug into that. He had looked for orders around in the community, and he had taught classes on various aspects of hoodoo and black magic. He was learned in that regard,
Yes.
and he decided that he would kind of forge this modern satanic philosophy, which has precedent from the 19th century iterations of Satan and his symbology. So there is an intelligence there. There's a scholarship there, but people would like to say, oh, well, it's first there was this enmity and hatred. You're going to hell. That was the idea to Satanism in the beginning. And then over some years, it was it's something to be laughed at because of its simplicity. Oh, it's just being heretical. It's just doing it for shock value, and unwillingness to kind of dig into that. So
yeah, are you just doing this for the shock value?
Sure.
And,
Which is another way. It's another way to dismiss. It's the silence of omission. So this idea that if we can laugh something off and critique it in such a way, then its message becomes mute. And
there's that willingness to dumb it down and to say that it's not built with any type of intelligence or knowledge that is.
Indeed. And although, right. And I think there's a lot of people who became familiar with the Satanic Bible and they moved on from it or graduated. They consider themselves evolving to Asatru or Crooked Path, the traditional witchcraft, or some Buddhism, or just go to atheism entirely. But
Well, weren't there some of the limitations that you feel like that maybe Michael Aquino felt in working with the Church of Satan?
Absolutely, actually. So Aquino, right. So there was the Schism of 75, where the
Right.
Church of Satan kind of, Aquino and some people around him separated from the Church of Satan to create the Temple of Set. And I don't think either party wanted that, by the way. I think there was a golden era, and Aquino was very close to LaVey. And I think LaVey might have made some administrative decisions that Aquino at the time had a very large vision that he believed he shared with LaVey. And I think there was some differences that kind of drove a wedge into the organization. And there was that separation. And as Aquino kind of recollects in a lot of his work, which has a kind of its own scholarship to it, and why it's kind of trusted in contemporary scholarship because of the way he was carefully detailed about his time in the Church of Satan. LaVey shared that vision, even the supernatural aspects of it. And I actually believe that. So I think LaVey was clearly supernaturalist. And I mean, he believed in the powers of magic and ritual and its effects, although he talked with atheistic overtones. You can look at just what is the implications of the belief of ritual magic and having an effect on reality in dramatic ways. LaVey was very much a supernaturalist, very much a magician, very much an occultist. And I think they've really played that down in the last couple of decades since his death with the Gilmore's church. I mean, and that's fine for everyone. You know, it's just become a lot more secular than it was in its originations. But yes, you know, Michael Aquino offered what many would consider the beginning of this spiritual identification within Satanism, what some would call post-Satanism, and that is through Setianism. And it all just blew up from there into the dozens of different paths that exist today after the age of the rise of the internet. And
well, it seemed to me also that Temple of Set became more an order of intellectual thinking in higher education. You know, it seemed like there was a point where they restructured where, you know, they had to be able to offer you for years and years things to learn still and how to grow within the Temple of Set. And I think at one point they were really losing a lot of people because after being in there a couple of years, this was all the order had nothing else to offer them. And I think at that point when they brought in, you know, a lot more intellectuals, and this may even be in the time when Don Webb came into the fold and stuff, and they started trying to make somebody's process within the Temple of Set a longer lasting experience.
Right. I think some of the more, I suppose you could say, how they supplemented Satanism as a whole is that they added this idea of what you say, this idea of this traditional esoteric education. I think where the Temple of Set made a decision that I feel negatively impacted it is that they didn't want any part, or Aquino didn't want any part of the showmanship that LaVey had engaged in. This idea of creating a movement, the idea of affecting society in a profound way. Aquino forbade all of that because he saw it as the error eventually that created the schism within the Church of Satan. And so it became a very private, it became a very secluded practice. And there's power to that. It's just, it's a decision. I feel like the Temple of Set could have had a more dramatic influence in a more explicit way, in a more direct way than it has, merely than being Well, if you could be a Satanist and be traditional esotericist, and you can have this higher level thinking, and perhaps that may be influenced early Luciferianism via Michael Ford. So it has had its influence, but I think that decision early on that Michael Aquino made greatly limited the scope of its influence.
Yeah, and I think also the impact of, like you had said very early into the podcast about the satanic panic. That if any institution really was shaken at its foundations, it would be the Temple of Set.
Right, that's right. I dated someone who was an active member in the Temple of Set, and she said that if anyone, they have a code that if anyone asks you where you're going, if you're on your way to a meeting, you say that you're going to a sci-fi reading club. And I had this spirited conversation where I said, we're in the 2020s now. Like, it's not, no one cares that, you could say the Temple is set and no one's going to know what you're doing. If they do know what you're doing, they're, oh, that's cool. Now, I'm being a bit hyperbolic. There are areas of the world where that will get you stoned to death. But when it comes to within the West, for the most part, you're
safe in the West,
right? People are going to care more that they think it's kind of dorky. That's going to be your biggest threat, is you're just going to be seen as kind of a nerd.
Well, while we've been talking about like these offshoots of the Church of Satan, what's your feelings on the Satanic Temple and basically its lack of any type of theistic Satanism? In fact, they just basically use it as a political process.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about something like that?
Right. My feelings towards the Satanic Temple is mixed. It's ambivalent. I see them as part of the Satanic story and history. So I don't take the bait of saying that they're not Satanists. I don't take that bait. I do consider them part of the narrative. They do have a precedence, again, in the 19th century idea of the emancipatory Satan. They have a lot of philosophy that you would have found in the Satanic Bible. They've just forbade all supernaturalism, and they took out some of the more Randian and some of the more Nietzschean ideas, and some of the more might is right. They replaced it with a more secular humanism. So really what the Satanic Temple is, at its base, is it's the Unitarian Universalist Church, but with pentagrams, with inverted pentagrams and goat figures, and that's fine. I think that has a role to play. This idea of humanism and having compassion for others and having empathy, and I think there's a place in Satanism for that in the legacy. Something that stands in complete opposite to, say, the Order of Nine Angles. That is more of a far right. It often expresses itself in far right, but it's more of a brutal and militant, or some might say impassioned, expression of the satanic religion, where being a Satanist has very real consequences, and as violent consequences in many ways, not just violent in a physical way, but violent in a spiritual, in a cultural way.
Yeah, and I totally know what I totally feel what you're saying there too, because my feelings about the Satanic Temple are mixed as well. I feel its lack of seriousness is its detractor.
Right. So I'm going to say that's one side of it. The other side of it is, in some ways, I feel like they've lampooned my religion.
Yes.
And it was hard. It's
into,
still
into cute little goats and pentacles and, Hello Kitty style evilness.
right. It's the religious version of Blackcraft, the Blackcraft clothing line. So
Yes.
where
Trend.
Right. I suddenly saw, and this was in the mid 2010s, like 2013, 2014, 2015. I suddenly saw everyone wearing Baphomets and everyone having brimstones and everyone having all these symbols that you had to at least do a 5-minute search on Google to know about. And now they're wearing it. They have no idea what it is. And it bothered me, and it bothers.
It's cultural appropriation.
Yeah,
nonetheless,
it is. It is in a very literal way, in a very strict way. It's cultural appropriation, and I feel the Satanic Temple is guilty of that. But I feel like
it cheapens it to a degree. I feel like it cheapens a lot of the hard work that goes in true occultism, the reading and the discipline and the meditation. And now I just throw on my Hello Kitty Blackcraft shirt and I go to my TST meeting or whatever, and I don't know. I just don't know really what that has to do with becoming my own God, or what does that really have to do with stripping away maybe the Christian dogma that we've all grown up in or anything. To me, it's just a political movement and uses the facade of Satanism to create this shock value, but also in the same essence, this wow value for these millennials.
Yeah, I have always said, and I still feel that way, that Satanism is an occult religion. That is to say that the occult has always informed, or it's had a collaboration with the satanic ideology in almost all iterations of Satanism. There is an active interest or a compulsion or an endorsement of the esoteric occult practice, and all the syncretic intersections that exist with occultism and modern esotericism. But the Satanic Temple has kind of more or less removed that part of it, so that it seems rather thin. I think, though, the satanic philosophy is still there. And that is to say, Satan as a liberating figure, or Lucifer as the Lord of Enlightenment, the light bearer, the Lord of intuition and innovation. I feel they've come to embrace that philosophy. I just
don't really see the higher learning process there. Or
I agree.
The willingness to expand our minds, or to to look into antiquity and it's like stripped of all that. At least that's how I feel about it. It's just like what great works of knowledge are they saying to people to read this?
There's no there's no check system. So there's no checks and balances. That is to say, there's nothing there to condition one, or there's nothing there to inspire one. There's no community there of learning some of the more esoteric, some of the more arcane, some of the more hidden aspects. When in other paths within Satanism and the occult, everywhere you go, people are talking about, here's a new book I'm learning, here's a new grimoire, here's this author I'm into, here's this. And so
it's so much more than what they've cooked it down to.
Right. And I just don't know if you're going to be, as a Satanic Temple Satanist, I don't know if you're going to be as exposed to the degree that most occultists, Satanists are exposed to read and read and read and understand. And truth be told, there's a lot of people that don't, but there is a community of learning. There is a community of study. And I haven't seen because there's no value in this idea of the supernatural, then that takes away all of the other benefits from learning this material. Why study ceremonial magic if you believe it's all hoopla? And that, now there's a lot of academics that are passionate to study these things, even though they're secularists. But generally speaking, unless you're specifically into and you have a passion for those things, you're not going to study them if you think they're what they would call fake,
Right.
fictitious. So there isn't a culture of learning the arcane, and that's the meat I think that both you and I see missing.
Right. And it's like, you know, for somebody like you to work in key philosophical ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche and how that interprets your view of the left-hand path. You know, it just you have to open yourself up to certain concepts and certain philosophies to even understand that approach to what you're trying to say.
Yeah, you know, in Friedrich Nietzsche and Left Hand Path, I make mention of this figure. He was this Polish author. His name is Stanisław Szybyszewski. There might be some Polish people listening that might be able to say his last name a little bit better, but he was a very early originating and polarizing figure that developed the idea of Satanism. He called himself a Satanist. This is in the 1890s. And he produced this book called The Synagogue of Satan, and he created this kind of pseudo movement called Satan's Children. And he had a book called Satan's Children. So he had come with this idea of being called of calling himself a Satanist, and it was only maybe 10% irony, but he really did see the cult of Satan being the idea of raw nature, this idea of a contentious and brutal nature of the world, almost like a Gnostic idea of materiality having this brutality to it. And he saw that as being the dominating power. So he called himself a Satanist, and he has actually a pretty complex philosophy around it. But even then, he was a disciple of Nietzsche while Nietzsche was still alive, and he even with Nietzsche's kind of push towards an atheistic refutation of the Christian religion and other religions, he still had an interest in the occult. And in some of his more drunken forays, he would threaten people with curses, and and like LaVey, there's actually a lot of intersections. Like LaVey, he criticized some of the occult movements at the time. He considered them light and silly. He considered the Theosophists and the Golden Dawn a very watered down version of what the occult should be. LaVey did the exact same thing 70 years later. So great minds think alike, right? So
right.
I think
or reach the same conclusions.
Similar conclusions. But even then, there was this idea of occultism, although it was, you know, what he would consider a more rational interpretation of occultism. You still had that desire to study and practice and a devotion of a sort. So this isn't just out of nowhere, you know, just Anton LaVey, even though he is a monolithic figure. It's all around him, and all the obscure figures between Szybyszewski or the 19th century occultists and LaVey, and in between you had believers. What we look to with Kenneth Grant, what we look to with some other figures that are a little less known, all of them had some sort of relationship to the occult. These are the people that look towards images of Lucifer, Satan, or consider themselves Luciferians or Satanists. So the legacy is there. The Satanic Temple doesn't have, you know, it has a precedence in the philosophy, but as a religion, it is definitely deviating, for sure.
Yeah, agreed. I want to ask you also a term that you like to use, and I'd like you to maybe describe to the audience how you would define this term, a modern Satanist.
Well, we've been given some definitions within scholarship on how to understand these terms. So you have Jasper Peterson. He gives three what he called heuristic categories for understanding Satanism. And that is the rational, the esoteric, and the sensational. Sensationalistic. So the rational Satanism would be the Satanism of Anton LaVey and some of the and like Shibashevsky. So this idea of has atheistic leanings, but wants to view the world with a rationalistic mindset, wants to view the world, but Satanism represents this form of enlightenment that teaches us logic, and they are going to lean more secular, although many of them believe in magic, ritual magic, and the supernatural. The Satanic Temple would actually be grouped into the rational as well, even without the esoteric aspects. That's rational. The esoteric is all what some people call the theistic Satanists. The Temple of Set is considered esoteric Satanism, and the O9A is considered esoteric Satanism, and the Dragon Rouge of Dr. Thomas Carlson. So, and others would be under the esoteric. The sensationalist is a category they gave to describe the teenage rebellion, the black metal Satanism of the 90s. Well, what's very interesting is that black metal Satanism has kind of evolved in the last couple of decades to become anti-cosmic Satanism, or the work of NAA 218, or the misanthropic Luciferian order, the MLO. So even the sensationalistic can make the transition into esoteric. So a modern Satanist, in a strict term, is going to refer to the rational wing. But if you're asking me, what does Satanism in our modern times, in contemporary, it's going to mean all those things, right? It can be any of those things. It could be any of those wings or branches of Satanism that exist today. So that would be a Satanist as it is understood in modern times. But if you're to say a modern Satanist, it would be the LaVeyan model, the rational model.
Yeah, I think you described that pretty well, and I think the way that they each fall into those categories, and as far as a modern Satanist, I was listening to more of hearing you define that, so when in your descriptions, a lot of times I hear you use that modern Satanism. So I wanted to ask somebody like yourself directly, what is modern Satanism to you?
Yeah, if in my last book, I definitely use that term quite a bit, and I established early on that when I say modern with a capital M, Satanism, it is referring to that wing, that rational wing that started in the 60s.
Awesome. Now you also, just to kind of change gears here a little bit, you also are involved in music, and you have a musical project that you incorporate a lot of your Satanism into. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Sure.
I've, for most of my life, I've worn many hats, and one of them that has always been consistent, although, something that I come back to, I always return to because I have a love for musical expression. And so it's always been in my life in some way. The last album that I did was some years ago, it was 2016. And that was Simsum. So that was my last, I had some music released a bit after that over the years, but that was my full, last full-length album. I have another that I'm gonna be releasing in the next few months, and that's going to be kind of a neofolk, neoclassical, minimalist acoustic with my particular brand of spoken word lyricism. So
interesting. Kind of a little overish kind of, that's maybe.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's it yeah, you could say it falls into some of the neofolk brand, some more poetic lyricism. My last album, Seem Soon, was more orchestral than this next album will be, in the sense that spent 3.5 years, many hours, hundreds of hours, layering multiple layers of acoustic and electronic instrumentation. This is going to be, the idea is, it's going to be called Do Not Suffer a Witch to Live. So it's kind of it's a biblical reference to thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And it was invoked in the Malleus Maleficarum to kind of feed the philosophy behind the Inquisition, which took 60, 70,000 lives throughout Europe's history. So I'm using that to kind of, in this upcoming album, I'm using it to speak to a conversation with the divine, in particular in the form of the feminine. So a lot of my spoken word and performance poetry has always been a part of my life as well. And that kind of fed into music. But in a lot of my works, I address, in a few of my works, I'm speaking to a goddess, or I'm speaking to a woman figure to represent an aspect of society or philosophy. In this one, I'm talking to a goddess who is on the edge of death. She has been betrayed. She has been raped. It is the goddess that created the universe who is a drug addict. This is a woman in all these forms, the battered woman in all her forms, who is coming to an end. And this is a conversation with her. And these songs explore these different discourse discussing the end of the divine, so the death of the divine. So the do not suffer a witch to live is both an accusation, saying kill her, kill the creator, kill the divine woman, but it's also her saying it to herself, and that I do not have a place to live. So it's a kind of it's approaching the divine in a nihilistic but loving way. So in some ways, it's a collection of love songs, but in a more melancholic sense. So
and this is something that you do just by yourself. Do you have any participants in this project?
Oh, I've always put together a foray of musicians. So for this album, two of the songs are actually from my friend Nathan Gordon, who lost his battle to heroin in 2017. So my best friend, he actually wrote all of the guitars on my last album. And when he was in his kind of worst years, so this is when he was in and out of rehab, and during a time he had a flip phone, and maybe going back to 2013 or 2012, and he was recording on that phone some of his guitar licks and just random little pieces of music he was writing on his guitar. And he was brilliant. Nathan was a brilliant guitarist, and he played beautiful melodies on anything you handed him. And he sent these to me, and I at the time I just saw it as kind of maybe drug fueled, kind of manic. And he ended up sending me dozens of them. And then a few years ago, I went through them. I looked for them. And I spent days listening to them, and I'm like, these are brilliant. And I wonder if there's a way I could take some of these, take them into the studio, clean them up. And even though they're going to sound rustic and a little they're going to sound a little dithered and a little rustic, I thought that it would be beautiful. And so I took some of those So a couple of songs are based on those recordings. I have another friend in Portland, Oregon, who is basically mixing and mastering everything and is also kind of doing some production. I have a musician in France. His band is called Mournful Skank, and his name is Arik, and he's a brilliant instrumentalist. He lives out in the forest, and he lives out in the forest in old pagan sites, and he makes music out there. And
very cool.
He's written a few pieces for the album that we're working with. I have another friend in Kentucky that wrote some music, so I'm working with him. And I wrote some of it myself. And then I have a close friend that made music with Nathan years ago. He's my good friend Matt, who has written the bass for all the tracks. So this has been in a sense, a global and even trans-physical. A trans-physical. I'm able to make music. We're able to make music with my fallen friend. We're able to make music with my friend who has passed, and that's
and honor him in the process.
That's right. It's been very emotional going through his old tunes, and they're very mournful. They're very somber, very painful, and in that sense, it's been difficult, but a beautiful pain, and it's beautiful in a way to understand the pain that he was going through.
Right.
He was a tortured person, and so and not to go into the general idea, the general conversation on drug addiction, but it's because of my relationship with him that I don't judge people who have fallen into terminal drug addiction, and I don't judge people who have succumbed to suicide. I don't make those judgments anymore, because I think some journeys for people, they don't experience this world like we do. We can't assume what our baseline is. We can't presume what our sober is on everyone else. Some people's sober are far worse than what our sober is. That is to say, daily life is hard for them. And some people I kind of feel aren't necessarily meant to be here for 85 years and have a family and have a traditional life. I think some people burn quickly, burn fast, and burn bright, and that's okay,
Mm-hmm. Yep. I know what you speak of. Sometimes it's just a short, torturous existence for somebody, but they leave a big impact.
Absolutely, and
so really good at expressing themselves in that short amount of time that they have.
Right. So, yeah, agreed, and. So I'm excited. Yeah, I only have one vocal. I have the vocal to record on the last song, and that's all that's left. And then most of the album's been mixed and mastered already. So it's this very last song, and I'll be doing that in the next few days. So
awesome.
And that will close up Do Not Suffer. I already have the art too. I already have the cover art that was done 2 years ago. So this has been locked and ready to go for a while.
So it's coming. It'll be out here soon, you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, and how will everybody be aware of that? What's the best way to keep tabs on everything Shea?
You could go to my, either my Instagram, various, social media, the music. So my Facebook, my Instagram, my YouTube, the music is going to primarily be released on Bandcamp and SoundCloud. But we will be releasing vinyl, maybe CDs as well, but I'm going to be doing a limited edition of vinyl for that. Awesome.
Vinyl is very popular these days. I play at an old death metal band. We've been around for like 30 years, and people still just love to buy classic vinyl. Every time we repress any of our old stuff, usually goes pretty fast.
Oh, that's great. I see vinyl as kind of being like in the occult grimoire community, where it's a little pricier than other forms than, say, a paperback, but there's a magic to the physical representation of the product.
Yeah, I think people, when I was a kid, the thing I liked about an album was the size of the artwork and being able to read the liner notes and all the little details and stuff about the record while you were listening to it. And I think a lot of that essence kind of went out the window with CDs. And now you have these a generation that was never connected to something like that, seeing vinyl, and it's just like it elicits the same things. It's like to sit there and look at the size of the artwork and see all the detail and everything, especially for a generation who purchases everything online or listens to it on Spotify or something.
Right, and I think that has its uses, and that's allowed us to become. It's
part of record loving. It's part of a record collector.
Right.
It's like holding and cherishing that object, and what it means to you, And so to a degree, it makes me happy that, that format's still alive for all of those types of reasons.
Yeah, I think there's the tactile essence of a record, especially if you're influenced or you're enmeshed in the world of the esoteric or spiritual or devotional or religious. I think a vinyl record better exemplifies that than a compact disc or just a simple download, right? So
it's just like books. I don't want it on a Kindle.
Right. That's.
I know a lot of people read their books on Kindle.
Yeah.
So that's okay, and I understand it. But I want the book. I want, and if I can afford the hardcover, I usually go with the hardcover because I just know that I'm going to value it and treasure it more than one of 500 digital devices or book titles on my Kindle.
Right. Yeah, I think the soft cover book is like the CD. The vinyl is the hardcover or the artisan edition or the deluxe edition of a grimoire, right?
Yeah, and PDF of your book, does that really make you feel like, right? It's like when I look at how nice your book looks, and I seen some of the, you held it up in one of the podcasts I was watching of you. I guess there's a limited edition of your book as well that you can't even get.
Oh, they sold out before the book even before it got into it in people's hands. The deluxe edition was sold out. There's only 12 in the world. And
wow.
Yeah, Atramentus Press puts an emphasis on the aesthetic to what they produce. And so I was definitely happy with what they did with the physical representation of the book. And the deluxe is absolutely gorgeous.
Do you have it with you right now?
Yeah, I could show it to you.
Yeah. I just on that podcast, I was like, wow, man, that thing just looks killer.
Yeah,
and that's what I mean. Like, I get so excited about just even seeing the book in that format. And it's like, no, I mean, click and download the PDF and put it on.
Yeah. Let me get that. I want to show you.
It's not even the same experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so for the people listening, I guess more or less it's an ornate kind of gold, kind of a shiny ornate gold design on the front.
Yeah, it's stunning.
With and it's bound in black goat leather. And then this kind of black and gold marble Int papers.
And is that in gold leaf as well?
That's right. Yeah. So this is in gold leaf. So, and even
Yeah, look at that. They're just
it's gorgeous.
Beautiful.
I was gonna say there's not enough good light to show you, but actually it gives
it's like a hologram.
Yeah, right. You can almost see your reflection. No, it's a gorgeous book, and I feel very blessed, and I think it had a good home with Atramentis, and yeah, there was a guy who mailed me. He bought both copies and he mailed them to me to sign. So he has the only signed deluxe edition in the world.
Wow.
But no, I've been very appreciative and very happy with what has come of Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left Hand Path, and I look forward to my next book, which is going to be released through Theon, and I'm pretty sure they're going to do a very good job with that one.
And a little sneak peek maybe into the themes or ideas that you're going to explore?
Yeah, my next book is Hymns of the Red Dragon, and I'm going to take a mix of, if we look at the last 2,500 years and we look at, what we've come to understand in modern demonolatry as the demon, and what are all the meanings behind that and the history behind that. And I'm going to take a few of the names that span that entire history. Obviously not exhaustive. I was making a spreadsheet as I was exegetically reading all of these traditional grimoires for the purpose of research and rereading ones I've known for years, but reading it with a more scholarly eye. And I started assembling every single demonic entity or spirit into a spreadsheet. And once I got to 600 and 700, and I was only, 3 or 4 of the major grimoires, I was like, this is taking too much time to track. So I'm certainly not going to make an exhaustive, but I'm selecting a collection of these spirits. I'm giving them a more robust history, which you don't see in the grimoires, a more scholarly, robust history of the spirit. And I'm offering a hymnal or hymns for these various spirits. At the end of Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left Hand Path, I offered 4 hymns: one for Dionysus, for Satan, for Lucifer, and Apollo. So the reason I included those is because they're being tied. Nietzsche speaks of the Apollonian and the Dionysian, and I was tying his Dionysian to the Satanic and his Apollonian to the Luciferic. And so I offered 2 hymns, Orphic hymns for Dionysus and Apollo, and I wrote hymns for Satan and Lucifer to kind of tie up at the end. I know I wanted to include that to offer something for some of the believers that were reading the book, or beyond those who are interested in the philosophy. I wanted to offer something to those who more esoterically minded, and maybe those who are even more devotional, because it was all kind of dense philosophy that covered the majority of the book. I wanted to end it with something that captures my own devotion, and offer that to the audience who would be exposed to the book. So I'm more or less in an interesting way, I'm continuing those hymns in a more robust way, and that's what my next book is.
That's great. And how soon do you think that'll be out?
Next year.
Yeah,
next year. Sooner than later. I should be closing things up by the beginning of spring.
Awesome.
So I
look forward to that.
I hope I hope for it to come out maybe by summer.
Great. We'll have to keep our eye out for that as well too. Now, wanted to ask you, looking back on all this experience that you've gone through, what has been the most transformative or illuminating moment in your entire esoteric journey?
The most illuminating moment.
Was it during a particular ritual, or was it in the reading of something, or when you finally understood something?
I guess there is a religious moment that I would like to highlight here that I think plays a part in your question, but it's one I don't talk about. There is, it's one I don't talk about at all, really. So it's over 10 years now. I was sitting with a friend at this is a close friend of mine. We were in Long Beach, California. So I grew up in Southern California. And now more or less I travel all around the place. At the moment I'm in Portland, Maine. So I'm on the opposite coast at the moment. But we used to meet at this pizza shop in the heart of Long Beach. And then there was a coffee shop kind of next to it. And we had, at the time, I was going through some rocky times, and I had my own struggle with substance abuse. And it was kind of, there was things unhinging in my life, and I had more or less a weekend warrior relationship to drugs, but it was still affecting my general psychology. It was kind of, I was unraveling. And I remember I was talking about my life to my friend who had been, he's older than me. He's a guide, he's a mentor. And we had been to this place that we had been to a decade prior. This is a tradition to go to this place. And I'm telling him about what's going on in my life. And he's not really saying much as he usually does. He's not opining on anything. And then I ask him, why aren't you saying anything? And he's like, because you're not going to like what I want to tell you. And I say, no, go, just say what you want to say. And he said, you need to stop fucking altering your mind. And then I had this conversation that a lot of addicts have, and that is, well, that's not it's not as major in my life as you think it is. And it's not causing these other things. These are unrelated. I had my spiel. And we had we went at it for a few hours where he is battling me, telling me that it's all related, that it's distracting you from the most important things that you need to face right now in your life. And so in the heat of this, we end up migrating from the pizza shop to this bookstore and in this coffee shop bookstore. And we're sitting down in such a way that we're both facing to our right. So we're up against a wall. To our right is the entrance to the street, going out to the street. And the door's open, of course. And him and I are, roughly 20 feet into the building, and we're sitting on these chairs talking side by side. We're sitting side by side to each other. And he brought up this analogy. He said, Shea, if you decide one night to drive down a freeway and you get a flat tire, or you drive down a road and you get a flat tire, and then you fix your tire, you get back on the road, you're on the same road, you get a flat tire again. He said, are you going to keep driving down that same road, or are you going to do something different? And he looked at me, and then I'm looking at him, and just to his left is the front door to the building. And a second after he ended that sentence, and he's looking at me for an answer, this woman walks in front of the door. She stops dead center in the door. She points forward and she said, look, he's got a flat tire. And I looked at him and I said, did you just hear that? And without even moving, he said, something or someone wants you to listen to me. And it hit me hard, like a ton of bricks. And all of my fight, all of my argument immediately stopped. I realized, okay, this is bigger. This is bigger than I'm allowing myself to understand. And I immediately looked at him and I said, I'm going to need your help. Meaning, me going sober, I'm going to need to separate from all the people I've come to know. I'm going to have to leave work for a while. I'm going to have to stop everything in my life because I know how hard it's going to be for me. And he said, I'm here and I'm going to help you as much as I possibly can. And that was my road to sobriety.
Yeah, it's a get your attention kind of moment there.
Yeah, and I had left my spirituality at the time, or I didn't leave it. I just was lazy with it. It had not been central. And in my process of going, getting treatment, and in that process, I was a born again Satanist. So I had then, by then, in the time that I first came into Satanism, and the time I kind of lulled for some years, by the time I returned and I wanted to dig into the books and dig into these things, it had become a new world of underground literature. All these books and all these grimoires had now come up, and I hadn't really dug into that community yet. And so I had this resurgence, and I fully accepted myself as a spiritual devotional, as a religious Satanist. And that's where my new life began, was around that time. Now a decade ago. Soon to be a decade ago. So I would say that moment, not the most obvious occultic experience. I mean, I've had interactions, and I've had
transformative though, nonetheless.
Right, but I think it's the most important kind of synchronicity or occultic or esoteric event that occurred to me. It was the most life-changing, and it was really just a moment. It was really just a moment. Now, I've had things that you could liken to visions and interactions with spirits and crazy synchronicities and things like that have convinced me of this world of magic over and over and over again. And it's beautiful and it's mysterious and it's powerful and it's strange. But that moment those few seconds was the most important few seconds of my life. And it set the pace.
I've done a good many interviews now. When I've spoke to a lot of the people I've spoke to, they all describe and it's of course not exactly like your moment, but there's always this like idiosyncrasy or this spark of a moment that put them in touch with the right person at that moment, or there was the conduit for them to reach the people that they had wanted to reach, and I fully believe in those moments, and that is the magic of it,
Yeah, I took that as there is something more important that has to happen. Stop fucking wasting your time. There is something important that you have to do. There are things you have to do in your story. You're wasting time. And it also let me know that no matter what it took to get me where I need to be, I'm gonna be okay. This is what's very interesting, I think. We have all these ideas of Satan, Lucifer, or the demonic, and we think of ferocity and brutality, and we think of black magic, and we think of all these other things. But I think of salvation. I think of when I've encountered the divine in the satanic religion, when I've had when I've a vision or a contact with the satanic divine, it's always been everything is going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And in a sense, a large part of my identity in my religion, you could say, is right-hand path. That is to say, some of the things we've given to the right-hand path, this idea of devotion, this idea of supplication, this idea of worship, this idea of salvation, this idea of
selflessness,
powerlessness.
Yes. They don't own the franchise
Right,
to that. Yeah.
Right. Within, and we could talk about the terms left-hand path and right-hand path that I don't think are terribly useful, although we're able to use them now and it makes sense. But yes, it doesn't, those things traditionally in the left-hand path have all of these things in it. So when people said, and this kind of goes back to when I said a lot of people who've read the Satanic Bible in the 90s then go, well, I got past it, I matured, I evolved. Well, I didn't see Satanism stopping there. I saw it having all these things. I saw it as complex. I saw it as a very kind of a long history and one to still be discovered and discussed and analyzed. I saw Satanism didn't stop at the Satanic Bible with all the things LaVey helped kind of trigger and be a catalyst for. It has grown into this immense.
And those people who said that they grew up or they outgrew it, they're not. They're living in a satanic environment right now.
Right. That's a good point. You're living in a post-satanic world.
Yeah, I mean, just like if it's not the age of Satan right now,
Right. The age of Satan. So for those listening, I'm sure a lot of people listening would probably know, but just in case they don't, LaVey would label, or he would designate 1966 as the birth of the age of Satan. And he had identified these ages that would follow the number 9. He saw 9 as the satanic number, and 9 always coming back to itself. And he saw the age of ice and the age of fire. And the age of ice is, I think it's roughly 1300 years, when man is taught to deny his nature, when he looks to the heavens for answers. And then in the age of fire, man looks to himself, or what Nietzsche would call the pagan, or the Titanic, the Titan. So of the earth, of nature, of man and flesh. And he would look to himself for the divine. And so LaVey designated 1966 as the beginning of the age of fire, the age of Satan.
I think we're definitely still living in those times.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in the 60s, you saw the sexual revolution. You saw the birth of psychedelics, of the peace movement. You saw the, what some would argue, some say first wave feminism, but I believe the suffragettes could arguably be the first wave feminism. But you saw second wave feminism happening in the late 60s, early 70s, burning the bra, stop objectifying us. And you saw
which turned into the Me Too movement.
Right.
There's so many things about today's society that I'm sure would make Dr. LaVey gag, because even towards the end, he turned down doing interviews and didn't really go out or anything. And
I think what happened was, it's kind of a sad story. I think what happened with LaVey is he won the schism of Aquino. I think he took more to heart than he would admit. I think that really, really bothered him. And I think he didn't just feel betrayed. I think he felt ashamed. And I don't think he didn't want it to happen, and I think that was beginning. And then the Satanic Panic would come. And what would happen is LaVey felt that he had rightfully, and I agree with him in this, and that he had a profound influence on culture. And he felt like the world wasn't recognizing that. Instead, he was more a pariah than ever before. And he was a pariah for the wrong reasons. So the world had then become enmeshed in the Satanic Panic, and there were Satanists everywhere, and LaVey was forgotten.
I think the TV talk show era of all of that shit really just left him empty, and seeing that, trying to go on those talk shows or having representatives go out there and try to convey as to what the Church of Satan was doing. I think it just played into the Satanic Panic thing of, people watching this and seeing those people. You just see them in a materialistic form. There they are on your screen. These are the people you can hate and blame for, all of this stuff. And that's not really what they were there. They were there trying to show, try to describe their movement and what it meant to them. But being on Geraldo and stuff like that, all it did is over sensationalize it and took any type of logical conversation about Satanism off the table.
Yeah, it wasn't a...
I mean, when was there ever an interview with just a sit down to discuss? It was always in these, everybody throwing chairs and yelling at each other. And, it was like, it was never presented in a manner like a sit down and just interview Anton LaVey about his belief system.
If LaVey survived into the podcast era, I think he would have become a household name. And I think LaVey would have gotten to, I think if he was alive today, he would be in his 80s now. He'd be in his late 80s. But if he hit Noam Chomsky age, who I think is like 99 or something now, if LaVey survived into the podcast era, even into the 2010s, the YouTube era, I think there would be a more favorable opinion of him. I think he would be appearing on some of these, and he would be well spoken, and I think he would have
a bit of an elder statesman, probably, on the subject.
Exactly, and I think he would have had some of the redemption he might have been looking for, but unfortunately, the ashes, you return to ashes at a time when, not when you're ready, but when the time comes. And he died at a time when I think the Satanic Panic was just ending. So it was, and I think he had felt betrayed further when he was sued by his estranged wife, and his children turned on him in that dispute. And his name was dragged through the mud, and he lived off of more or less the goodwill of friends, and he felt society had forgotten him, culture had betrayed him, and the people that he trusted the most had more or less turned on him, and he died at the end of that story. Yeah. There was a lot of his last 10 years of life. He was something of a defeated man. And that's a hard thing to say about him, because his image, it was not something he would admit. But if you look at his final interviews, especially
definitely withdrawn, he withdrew from life to a degree,
Right. So, yeah. So, he still died a gentleman, though.
Yes. And again, the great achievement of moving the Satanism ball down the field, and definitely making it definitely part of the 90s and the 2000s. I mean, there's no denying it, the impact that Satanism had on American society.
Yeah, culturally, religiously, esoteric. You could see it in trad witchcraft. You could see it in the Left-Hand Path, of course. You can see it in some of the Reconstructionists.
TV shows where they're using his likeness. What is it? What's the show on Fox or whatever? They even had they even had a season where it was about the Church of Satan and stuff. Oh, the hell is that stupid show called?
When was it?
It was on. It's.
Is this recent?
Jessica Lange used to be in all of them or whatever, and it's like a long American Horror Story.
Oh, American Horror Story. Right.
They had a Night Stalker one with Richard Ramirez, and then they had another season that it was basically with they did the Rosemary's Baby thing, but they even had an individual that looked like Anton LaVey, dressed like him and everything, in the show.
Yeah, I think it's even bigger than that. I think other other than references to Satanism or LaVey, although that's true, he's still a namesake. I think the idea of embracing the darker aspects of spirituality, the idea of understanding the nature of what we used to understand the nature of evil and demonic entities, I think the biggest impact LaVey had is it taught, or it allowed, it gave warranty to others that they can embrace the darker aspects of spirituality. These demonic entities, it's okay to understand them, to invoke them, or perhaps even worship them. And it's that fearlessness that opened the floodgates for everything we see in the occult today.
Right.
So yeah, without LaVey, I have high doubts we would have got there as soon, or if at all. So
what advice would you give to individuals now that are exploring the left-hand path for the first time?
I would say that, the print-on-demand era has put out a lot of poor quality material. And there's a lot of, what I would call Facebook group occultism or Facebook group Satanism. And that is to say that you have a kind of, you have the ability to just, whatever random idea, unverified, unchecked, lack of scholarship, can be echoed and megaphoned to very large audiences. So you have a lot of just poor quality or not very inspired bullshit that has taken the main stage and is readily available by the hundreds of print-on-demand material. Now, that is not to say print-on-demand on its own means low quality, and that is not to say that anyone that all commentary or advice or information or content in a Facebook group is poor quality. That's not to say that at all. There's wonderful exchange that happens in these groups. But what I mean to say is a lack of attention and a lack of care and a very, very kind of aggressive and weaponized expression of religiosity or philosophy. Just this. So my advice would be, do not trust anything at face value. Do not trust information. The advice I'd give for anyone coming to the left-hand path today is the advice I'd give to anyone coming into the world of just in the world of media today. And that is to say, don't trust anything on face value. Look at who is delivering the information. Look at if there's any references, is there any scholarship, especially if they're speaking of history, is there any scholarship? It doesn't mean everything has to be academic in what you consume, but are they citing something in history? Are they making some sort of leap that has no basis or no precedence? They're kind of speaking out of their ass. I think it's important to have that discretionary eye. Look at what is being claimed and look at the connections and have a high mark for your diet, right? We have diets in our lives, or we have what we're willing to eat or consume. Have that diet in your media. Have that diet in the material and the books that you read. Have a strict one. Have one that understands and is educate oneself to not allow just any kind of random idea to be factored in. So I think understanding the historical record when it comes to where Lucifer comes from, where Satan comes from, as far as left-hand path, go to the sources for understanding the Qliphoth or the Kelipot, for understanding some of these demonic figures. What is their history? Where do they come from? Where does Belial or Belial or Belial or Astaroth or Asmodeus or Shamyaza? What is the history to, what is the origination of these texts, and what have they meant over time? And I think once you have that grounding, you can then understand and be able to sort out, in a more surgical way, what makes sense. But
agreed. You have to understand where these things come from and what their place is in order to understand all, the philosophy. I think, it didn't start in 1969. It's been going for, a long time before that process, just left-hand path, just with the, with the Church of Satan, that became like the most known in, let's say, like our generation.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also say, when I'm thinking about it, I'd also say, don't give in to the us and them thinking. There's a lot of groups, and it can be pretty sectarian. I mentioned the atheist versus theist debate. I would suggest anyone new coming into the fold to not give in to that, and understand there is dozens of different ways to practice this faith and study this discipline, and don't give in to the sectarian bait of accusing others and holding one type of belief over another. And I know we talked a little bit of shit about the Satanic Temple, but like I said, I consider them part of the family, and I don't try to discount what they are. I just have my own disagreements. But I would say don't fall into feeling like you must side with one thing or the other, and don't give in to that distraction.
Yeah, I think it wasn't so much bashing them as much as what about them we feel contrary about.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that
doesn't mean we don't support their endeavors or,
right, right.
or anything like that. It just, it's just not the right organization for me.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. But Shea, it's been an amazing pleasure to have you on. And I definitely want to have you back when your new book is out. What was the title of that book?
Hymns of the Red Dragon.
When Hymns of the Red Dragon's out, I'd love to have you back. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I did too. I would love to come back to talk about it. I think we got to, in the last year, I've spoken to quite a bit of people too, in the process of talking about and promoting Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left-Hand Path, and we got to cut into some new domain that I don't usually talk about. So it's been kind of refreshing, and I appreciate your investigations into this world and into some of my own work. And I appreciate that level of detail and attention in a host. So I think you're doing something great here, and thank you.
Thank you very much. And like I said, we'll have you back real soon.
Thank you, brother.